Adrenaline Radio, 1680 on your AM dial. I'm Fred Blanchard, your host for Adrenaline Motorsports. This evening, we've been fortunate enough to have Mr. Steve Montrelli back here in studio. Steve, the other thing that we wanted to touch on a little bit, that people who don't know, Steve Pluger is a funny car chassis builder by trade. And I don't know if he's still in that side of the business or not, but I know that when it got into the nostalgia part of it, he moved forward and started building cars for that. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I think that he's got cars in the rack basically, and he's waiting if anybody else wants to get involved. Yeah, he's ready to move forward with that. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Steve's, he's trying to do it as a business also, and also enjoy it. He hires drivers, or the driver comes to him and says, "I'd like to run your car for," whether it's one race, 3, 5, 10 races, or a whole season, and they come to some kind of a financial agreement. It's a lot simpler for a driver to come to the racetrack on these nostalgia cars and say, I can bring this much money for this race or whatever, which is, we're not talking about a giant amount of money, but I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a lot more feasible than, like, if you wanted to get a Don Schumacher or a John Force car, you probably have to bring in anywhere between $1 million and $2 million to get the ride. However, if you were trying to do that on your own, you would have to have, probably, if you had started from scratch, you'd probably have $8 million to build everything to get to the racetrack. So it's a lot cheaper for a driver to go get a sponsor for $1 million, $1.5 million to $2 million, and then find somebody. On the big side, Jim Head, he's been looking for somebody, a driver. He wants to get out of the seat, but he hasn't had the right guy come, or the guy hasn't been able to get a sponsor to bring enough money for Jim to say, okay, you're going to drive this car for the season.
So this sounds like the drivers of today, not like in the early days, they have to go out and promote the sponsors that they need to have to get in a car and go for a ride. So instead of back in the early days, it was musical drivers in most of these cars. Now it's musical cars. Rent a car to get your driver in. It sounds like also that the drivers of the big show are wanting to get involved with this nostalgia drag race craze that's going on here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's simpler for them. The name helps the nostalgia brigade there that are trying to, get more interest in it. You get the name guys out there. Some of the spectators know the name people from the big races. And then we have a lot of spectators that are starting to come out because they're hearing the advertisements on the radio and the TV and whatever to bring these new spectators out. Some of the people are taking, like NHRA now is starting to do little different things. Like some races, let's just say, cost you $55 to get in, and another race it's $75 to get in. It depends on what part of the country they're at. I was noticing that there was a spectator, and they were evaluating what it would cost to go to one of these races, and they decided they can only go to one race a year, and it basically costs for two people to go to a race. If you have to go roughly 500 miles from your home for the weekend, for everything, it costs you anywhere between $700 and $900.
Wow, that's a ton of money for a person to go to the drag race. However, it's not that case when you go to strips like Formoso in Bakersfield.
Correct.
It's a little different kind of money.
Yeah, I mean, you got a $75 weekend for 3 days. You have many, many more cars than you do at the big show today. You also have, I'm not going to say you have as many spectators, but you have a very good amount of spectators, and they're able to go up to every car, walk around them, talk to the drivers, talk to the crews. Or there's no big deal where they've got fences or chains around the cars so you can't get near the cars. Which in the big show, the only reason it's that way is because they only have an hour. 70 minutes to have a car ready to go.
Yes, the turnaround time for doing their maintenance on the vehicle. Sure, absolutely.
The nostalgia thing is just kickback, kind of like it was in the old days. It's starting to change a little bit more now. The guys are taking the motors apart and they're doing the clutches and they're doing all that stuff. But really, it even needs to be pulled back just a little bit.
Well, when you say pull back, we had this conversation early on. Where are the nostalgia guys getting all their parts from? I mean, all of a sudden, somebody's in the making of engine parts for these guys. I can't believe that they're manufacturing that much parts and pieces here.
Well, what's happening is the big guys, they have, let's just say they run what we call a billet block. It's for safety. Every once in a while, they'll kick the rods out of that block, so the block has to be completely taken apart, has to go to a welder, and then it has to go back into the CNC machine to get everything right again. Well, what's happening is the manufacturer of those blocks, what they're doing, they have new blocks at the racetrack in a semi-trailer, and if a guy needs to buy a block, he buys the block and he trades in the old block. And the manufacturer takes it back 10, 12 blocks, 2-3 months down the road, and they get them all welded, and they go through the CNC machine to make them almost like new. Only they've had, all of the tolerances are proper, and then there'll be some aftermarket people that buy that type of stuff and resells it to the nostalgia cars.
Yeah, so the big show, once they're having that remanufactured process, none of those blocks or components go back to the big show.
Well, the only ones that might go back would be the guys that are kind of the weekend warriors that they go to maybe 5 or 6 races a year. They buy that stuff too so that they can get it cheaper. The good part about that is for the big show that the guys go run 5, 6, 10 races a year is they can buy the crankshafts, they can buy the cylinder heads, and they can buy the block, which is all the same stuff for them. But now when you get into the nostalgia cars, what they did to start with is they were buying these blocks, and they were buying the crank, and they were buying it, so it'd be a 500 cubic inch motor.
But there's limitations on the nostalgia guys, isn't there? They've got tire size issues that you got to limit yourself to that, rear end gears, and tell me some more.
Okay, well, when you get into the nostalgia thing, originally, like I said, they would just buy the stuff from the big guys, and they could put it in the car and go out there. But now here comes Pluger and Bucky, and there's 5 or 6 cars. And don't misunderstand, but they realized that engine isn't going to make the power of the big guys because they don't have the big blowers, they don't have the big fuel pumps, they don't have all that. But now they got this big set of cylinder heads, and these big cylinder heads are not going. They'll work fine, but not when you have guys that are going out and buying brand new state-of-the-art heads that have been remanufactured from in the 70s, where they have smaller ports, where everything's efficient. The blower manifold, the flow characteristics of the head. So now you can run still run the 88 or 90%, but the amount of blower, overdrive, and all of that all works together. But what they do is they run the engine much smaller. They run a 413-inch motor instead of a 500-inch motor, and they RPM it, and they put all the ratios into the car where that engine is basically kind of running like a blown alcohol funny car.
So basically, Steve, what we're doing is that we're going back to the future. What we're doing is that we're going back to the smaller displacement motors to see, or it's proving itself to be a better motor that run pretty close to the speeds needed based on the criteria that they have to meet, such as one fuel pump, which is smaller, one magneto, basically the certain size tire, and a certain gear ratio, and the nostalgia cars are limited to things of that nature. So it sounds like to me it truly is back to the future.
Exactly.